He never knew the shift was happening. That's how digital lust works. It doesn't knock, it creeps. No alarms, no warnings, just tiny rewiring moments that feel harmless. And when a man tells himself, it's just a video, it's just 10 minutes, it's just release, he forgets the most brutal truth. The brain doesn't care about his excuses, it only cares about the stimulus. Digital lust is not about sex. It's not about women. It's not even about pleasure. It's about chemicals. Dopamine. Reward. Repetition. That's the first dark psychology rule. He wasn't chasing pleasure, he was chasing chemicals. When he grabs his phone, laptop, tablet, whatever, he thinks he's relaxing. But the brain is acting like a junkie with a credit card. Swipe, spike, repeat. And because it happens in silence, no smell, no evidence, no hangover, a man convinces himself he's safe. But he's not safe. He's being conditioned. Digital lust is like a psychological slot machine. He thinks he's choosing the content. He thinks he's browsing freely. But the brain is basically saying, show me something new so I don't get bored. That's the dopamine loop. And dopamine has only one mission. Seek novelty, seek intensity, seek more. This is where the rewiring begins. The dopamine hijack, the brain gets trained like a lab rat. People think dopamine is pleasure. It's not. Dopamine is anticipation. Dopamine is pursuit. Dopamine is one more scroll. When digital lust enters the picture, dopamine turns into a trainer, and the brain becomes the pet. He clicks something shocking. Dopamine spikes. He scrolls to something hotter. Dopamine spikes again. He changes the video after 30 seconds. Another spike. His brain learns one message. Real life is too slow. I need stimulation now. That message is poison. It teaches impatience. It teaches entitlement. It teaches shortcut pleasure. This is why men stuck in digital lust start to feel fried. They struggle to sit through a movie. They can't focus on reading. They lose interest in real dating. They get bored with real women. Why? Because real humans don't jump cut like porn edits. Real intimacy doesn't deliver dopamine at 10 spikes per minute. Real relationships require patience, vulnerability, awkwardness, chemistry, communication. A screen asks for none of that. A screen says, consume, dispose, next. And the brain obeys. Motivation isn't magic. Motivation is delayed reward mindset. He works out today because the body changes months later. He studies today because success comes later. He grinds today because money comes later. Motivation is long-term chemistry. Digital lust destroys that pacing. Why? Because porn teaches. Why grind when you can get pleasure right now? There is no effort, no skill, no contribution, no earning, no social value, no friction, just shortcut reward. The brain loves shortcuts, but shortcuts destroy character. If the brain learns it can get reward without effort, without discomfort, without time, then it slowly stops caring about effort. So motivation collapses. This is why guys who are deep in digital lust feel lazy, foggy, unambitious, tired, bored with work, bored with goals, bored with reality. He thinks something's wrong with his discipline. But it's not discipline. It's neurochemistry. He trained his brain to prefer the shortest route to reward. And when the brain memorizes that script, it deploys it everywhere. Work, gym, studying, self-respect, dating. He unconsciously says, if it's not instantly rewarding, I don't want it. That is dopamine addiction. That is collapse. Patience is painful because patience is uncertainty. But porn removes uncertainty. It gives an illusion. Instant control. Control over what body. Control over what fantasy. Control over when to skip. Control over how to finish. That's God mode stimulation. But real intimacy is unpredictable. Real people move differently. Real sexual energy takes time. Real connection requires two nervous systems adjusting to each other. For a man lost in digital lust, this feels primitive and boring. Because he's comparing reality to edited hyperstimulus. And hyperstimulus always wins on first impression. So patience dies. He becomes irritated by slowness. He gets annoyed by emotional bonding. He feels awkward with flirting. He hates being vulnerable. He avoids experiences where he is in control. Because control is addictive. And porn is control. Control is dopamine. Dopamine is slavery. That's the pattern. Here's the most disturbing psychological effect. What turns him on stops being emotional, it becomes mechanical. It's not the woman. It's not the chemistry. It's not the moment. It's the contrast, shock, novelty. Porn conditions the brain to respond to variety, escalation, shock factor, extremity, something new every minute. So when a real woman smiles at him, his brain doesn't spike. When a real body is in front of him, his brain doesn't panic with excitement. When real intimacy begins, he feels awkward, disconnected, numb. Why? Because he's comparing a real-life nervous system to a hyperduction dopamine weapon. Porn is not sex, porn is performance. And the brain adapts to performance. Soon the brain says, I need more stimulation to feel anything. That's desensitization. When desensitization hits, erections get weaker. Attraction gets dull. Eye contact feels uncomfortable. The mind wanders. Fantasy replaces presence. He blames himself. He thinks he's broken. He thinks something is wrong with his masculinity. But the truth is darker. His nervous system is fried, not his masculinity. Digital lust numbers his reward circuitry. Just like a drug, when the brain gets used to frequent dopamine, it starts treating low dopamine as a threat. So boredom feels painful. Silence feels suffocating. Stillness feels wrong. That's withdrawal. Psychological withdrawal. Identity withdrawal. He can't sit alone with his thoughts. He can't sleep without a screen. He can't relax without stimulation. He can't imagine being calm without reward. His brain panics because the brain believes stimulation equals safety. Reality equals threat. That's addiction. Not by choice, by conditioning. Digital lust makes the self smaller. Here's the harsh truth. Addiction shrinks identity. He stops exploring life. He stops taking risks. He stops forming relationships. He stops expressing confidence. Because confidence comes from earned dopamine. From winning. From progress. From uncomfortable effort. Porn robs that. So the self shrinks. The world shrinks. His emotional range shrinks. He becomes a version of himself optimized for gratification, secrecy, avoidance. That's not life. That's survival. Digital lust teaches the most toxic habit. Avoiding discomfort. And avoidance becomes a personality trait. Avoid conversations. Avoid awkward dates. Avoid emotional exposure. Avoid sexual patience. Avoid long-term effort. Avoid. Avoidance becomes identity. The cold narrator verdict. He thought he was using the screen. But the screen was using him. He thought he was relaxing. But he was training dependency. He thought he was chasing pleasure. But he was chasing dopamine spikes. He thought porn was entertainment. But porn was neurological colonization. That's the psychological violence. Digital lust slowly releases dopamine until the brain forgets how to live without it. He doesn't even realize the rewiring is happening. Because it's happening in microdoses. Swipe, scroll, Spike, forget, but the brain remembers everything. Every spike is a lesson. Every orgasm is a chemical receipt. Every click is a reinforcement. And reinforcement is training. So the dark truth stands. He wasn't chasing pleasure, he was chasing chemicals. He traded patience for speed. He traded real intimacy for fantasy. He traded identity for stimulation. He traded motivation for convenience. Addiction doesn't advertise itself. It doesn't say, "Hey bro, I'm here to destroy your self-respect." It does the opposite, it pretends to help. Addiction arrives dressed like a solution. Like comfort. Like stress relief. Like a breather. Like a private sanctuary. That's why digital lust is psychologically lethal. It pretends to give peace while quietly stealing structure. A man thinks he's coping. He thinks he's taking the edge off. He thinks it's harmless release. But inside the brain, a different script is loading. Every click becomes a sedative for emotions he refuses to face. That's the core of addiction, avoidance disguised as relief. Human beings hate emotional discomfort. We fear rejection, failure, loneliness, sadness, insecurity, boredom, pressure. Digital lust offers a fake cure. Feeling anxious. Spike dopamine. Feeling lonely. Spike dopamine. Feeling rejected. Spike dopamine. Feeling stressed. Spike dopamine. It becomes emotional anesthesia. Not growth. Not courage. Not self-development. Just numbing. And numbing turns into habit. He stops learning how to regulate emotions. He stops developing psychological resilience. He stops confronting difficult realities. Because he believes he already has a tool, a way to shut feelings off. That tool becomes a cage. When a man uses digital lust as coping, he's telling his nervous system, "I'm incapable of managing life without stimulation." That message is corrosive. It destroys responsibility. It destroys emotional toughness. It destroys self-belief. Instead of solving problems, he disconnects. Instead of expressing pain, he buries it. Instead of improving himself, he escapes himself. He doesn't process trauma. He doesn't build social skills. He doesn't develop emotional depth. Why would he? He has a shortcut, a button that replaces effort with sedation. Addiction makes a man a passenger in his own mind. He's not steering. He's hiding. Dependency doesn't scream. Dependency whispers. Just once more. It's been a long day. You deserve it. Relax, nobody knows. You can quit later. Later becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. Next month becomes 5 years. The habit accelerates. The life decelerates. This contrast builds a psychological split. Behavior moves fast, life moves slow. That's why dependency is invisible. He doesn't see massive consequences. He sees tiny withdrawals. Lack of ambition. Less eye contact. More social fear. Less dating effort. More isolation. Heavier anxiety. It's like a mental erosion. Slow, silent, consistent, deadly. He's not destroying his life in one explosion. He's dissolving it one excuse at a time. Ask any addicted mind why they keep doing it. They don't say, "I'm destroying my identity," or "I'm replacing emotional intelligence with reward-seeking." They say, "It helps me relax." But relaxation is a lie. There is no relaxation. There is only dopamine withdrawal and dopamine reset. He's not reducing stress. He's temporarily muting stress while reinforcing dependency. That's why the relief never lasts. Relief that depends on a habit isn't relief, it's chemical debt. He pays interest every time. His nervous system grows weaker. His stress tolerance shrinks. His coping range narrows. Soon he can't handle life without the crutch. That's when addiction wins. Here's the dark truth. Addiction turns a man into a runner. Running from responsibility. Running from emotional pressure. Running from effort. Running from uncertainty. He retreats into a bubble where nothing is demanded from him. No rejection. No proving himself. No maturing. Escape becomes personality. Life becomes an inconvenience. He becomes a spectator, not a participant. That's the psychological cost. He stops being a man in motion and becomes a man in hiding. The secrecy effect: hiding creates shame, and shame creates more hiding. Addiction loves secrecy. Secrecy builds shame. Shame builds isolation. Isolation builds more dependency. Why? Because when a man feels ashamed, he doesn't turn to courage. He turns to the same numbing mechanism that caused the shame. This creates a paradox loop. He escapes to avoid shame, but every escape creates more shame. The loop feeds itself. And because no one knows, and because it's invisible, and because society laughs at addiction until it destroys someone, he convinces himself he's in control. But he's not. Control means choice. Addiction means compulsion. He's not choosing anymore. He's obeying. Addiction alters social instincts. Other people, their expectations, their standards, their presence, start to feel like pressure. Pressure triggers discomfort. Discomfort triggers escape. So he withdraws, not because he doesn't like people, but because interacting with people requires emotional exposure. Addicted minds avoid exposure. He slowly fades from conversations, friendships, dating effort, social risk, trying new things, building connections. He isolates because isolation is safe. Safe means no accountability. No accountability means no growth. That's how dependency becomes a lifestyle. The emotional numbing, life feels flat. Digital lust gives him chemical highs. So normal emotions feel like lows. Human brain chemistry isn't designed to spike endlessly. It's designed to fluctuate slowly, naturally, meaningfully. When a man hacks this system, he loses emotional range. Happiness becomes muted. Joy becomes fragile. Peace becomes foreign. Sadness becomes unbearable. Boredom becomes torture. He doesn't feel stable. He feels empty. So he seeks relief. And the loop repeats. Addiction is just emotional outsourcing. He tells a habit to regulate his feelings because he never learned how. And every time he avoids feeling, he loses another layer of self-trust. A man believes he's escaping stress. But stress waits. He believes he's escaping loneliness. But loneliness deepens. He believes he's escaping fear. But fear compounds. Nothing he avoids disappears. It grows in the dark, waiting. Addiction doesn't fix. It postpones. And postponing is the most destructive psychological habit of all. Because reality always comes back harder. He wasn't running away from his problems. He was running toward a future version of himself who is weaker, more anxious, more dependent, and less alive. That's not escape. That's surrender. Identity is not one big thing. Identity is made of tiny signals repeated over time. How he behaves, how he reacts, how he makes decisions, how he copes. Addiction interferes with that pattern. Not with one explosion, but with erosion. A slow leak. A quiet subtraction of self. And the strangest part, he doesn't feel a switch, he feels a fade. He stops recognizing himself, but he can't explain why. He thinks he's just tired, or just distracted, or just stressed. But beneath the excuses lives a simple psychological reality. He was training his brain to want dopamine, not life. Identity collapses when a man abandons earned reward and replaces it with instant reward. Why? Because earned reward builds pride. Instant reward builds dependency. One builds character. One dissolves it. Most men think confidence is something you decide to have. That's fantasy. Confidence is neurochemical evidence. Confidence comes from repeatedly proving to yourself that you can. Control impulses. Delay gratification. Tolerate discomfort. Succeed at goals. Resist shortcuts. Overcome fear. When a man does these repeatedly, the brain releases a sense of capability. I can handle life. That's confidence. Now flip the chemistry. If his brain repeatedly sees him avoiding stress, choosing shortcuts, hiding from emotions, relying on stimulation, collapsing under discomfort, the brain releases a different message. He can't handle life. That becomes insecurity. So confidence doesn't disappear. It gets replaced by proof of weakness. Digital lust feeds that weakness. He doesn't overcome anything. He doesn't build tolerance. He doesn't earn reward. He doesn't negotiate social reality. He presses a button. He retreats. He gets a spike. And the brain learns. We don't fight, we flee. That habit attacks identity. Because confidence is not about pride. Confidence is self-trust. And a man can't trust himself if he knows he keeps escaping. Attention is everything. Attention determines what he values, what he works on, what he becomes. A short attention span means a short identity. A long attention span means a long future. Digital lust rewires attention into micro-gratification cycles. Swipe, change, skip, stimulate. The nervous system learns. I only focus if I get instant reward. This is catastrophic socially and cognitively. Because careers demand patience. Relationships demand presence. Growth demands boredom. If the brain can't tolerate boredom, it can't build a future. That's why addicted minds feel scattered. They start tasks and quit. They plan goals and abandon them. They want results but can't grind. They fantasize but don't execute. The attention has been fragmented into chemical loops. And fragmented attention creates fragmented identity. A man becomes a collection of impulses, not a builder of reality. Eye contact is not visual, it's neurological. Eye contact requires presence, confidence, emotional capacity, social courage. When a man avoids real human intimacy, eye contact becomes uncomfortable. Because eye contact triggers vulnerability. Addicted minds don't want vulnerability, they want control. A screen gives control. A person demands presence. So he avoids eyes. He avoids reading faces. He avoids social risk. He becomes more comfortable with solo stimulation than interpersonal communication. That destroys social instincts. A man who struggles to make eye contact struggles to ask for opportunities, flirt comfortably, negotiate boundaries, assert himself, express emotion. Identity needs expression. But he's stuck in hiding mode. His personality collapses into silence. Self-worth is not an opinion, it's a reference. It comes from evidence. I work hard. I follow through. I can delay pleasure. I can conquer difficulty. I can build value. But addiction replaces that with cheap validation. I feel good because chemicals told me to. That's fake self-worth. That's outsourced identity. He doesn't feel good because of who he is. He feels good because of what he consumes. So without stimulation, he feels empty, useless, boring, anxious, worthless. That's the chemical prison. Self-worth becomes conditional, dependent, borrowed. He stops feeling proud of himself because he stopped earning anything. That's not personality loss. That's dignity erosion. Most men want to believe the habit costs time. But time is replaceable. The real cost is identity. Because every time he chose stimulation over effort, he made a trade. Dopamine instead of discipline. Fantasy instead of presence. Escape instead of resilience. Impulse instead of patience. Comfort instead of growth. That's a life exchange. The more he trades, the less he becomes. He begins living as a nervous system trying to self-soothe, not as a man building a life. That trade is invisible. That trade is cumulative. That trade becomes identity. Identity collapses quietly. He won't wake up and say, "I lost my sense of self." He will wake up and say, "I don't feel like myself anymore." That sentence is the tombstone of identity. Because he knows something is gone. But he doesn't know how to retrieve it. Identity is muscle. He stopped using it. Confidence is a skill. He stopped practicing it. Attention is a weapon. He stopped sharpening it. Presence is intimacy. He avoided it. Self-worth is earned. He outsourced it. So identity fell apart. Not in tragedy. In routine. He didn't break. He just dissolved. He wasn't watching pixels. He was trading pieces of himself. The world thinks addiction damages the body. That's the distraction. The real damage is psychological. It attacks the mind, the emotions, and the social fabric of a man's life. The body heals. The brain remembers. Digital lust isn't a physical injury. It's a cognitive distortion. The cost doesn't show up as scars. It shows up as identity shrinkage, emotional claustrophobia, and social decay. And because everything happens inside the nervous system, no one sees it. No one confronts it. No one intervenes. A man just slowly becomes smaller. More withdrawn. More numbed. More ashamed. That's the hidden cost. It changes how he feels, not how he looks. Shame doesn't shout, it whispers. It says things like, "You're weak. You're not a man. You can't control yourself. You're disgusting. You hide because you're inferior." Even if the habit is common. Even if society jokes about it. Even if nobody talks about consequences. The brain keeps score. Shame is the emotion that tells him he violated his own standards. That is psychological self-warfare. Shame separates the man from his self-image. There is the man he wants to be. And there is the man he is acting like. The distance between those two creates internal hostility. He becomes his own enemy, his own accuser, his own critic. But shame doesn't correct behavior. Shame paralyzes behavior. The more shame he feels, the more he escapes. And the more he escapes, the more shame he feels. That is a prison with no walls. He is trapped inside his own evaluation. Anxiety happens when the mind says, "Something is wrong and I can't fix it." Addiction amplifies that message. Why? Because he knows he's avoiding life. He knows his discipline is fractured. He knows he's sinking deeper. But he can't talk about it. He can't explain it. He can't share it. So the nervous system absorbs the pressure. He becomes jumpier, more irritable, more reactive, less grounded. His brain is constantly managing two realities. The fake calm of stimulation, the underlying panic of emotional avoidance. That mismatch creates chronic stress. And chronic stress becomes anxiety. He's not anxious about work or women or money. He's anxious about the gap between his habits and his potential. And every time he uses digital lust to calm down, he reinforces the root problem. He cannot regulate emotion without chemicals. That is dependency. And dependency breeds fear. Humans are social because social validation teaches self-worth. But what happens when a man feels ashamed of who he has become? He avoids mirrors. And people are mirrors. Friends expect growth. Women expect effort. Family expects responsibility. Society expects contribution. Those expectations feel like threats. So he isolates, not because he likes being alone, but because being alone is the only place he doesn't feel judged. Isolation becomes comfort. Comfort becomes habit. Habit becomes identity. He convinces himself he's independent. But independence without participation is not strength. It's psychological retreat. And retreat kills opportunity. He stops networking. He stops dating. He stops pursuing. He stops risking. His world gets tiny. Addiction doesn't steal friends. It steals the desire for connection. The scariest cost isn't numb pleasure. It's numb emotion. Humans are wired to bond slowly. Chemistry builds gradually. Arousal escalates from intimacy, trust, excitement, novelty. But addiction retrains the system. Stimulation first, emotion never. So the reward system stops caring about romance, emotional touch, vulnerability, real-time human rhythm, the unknown, anticipation. He needs extremes to feel anything. And when he needs extremes to feel pleasure, he eventually needs extremes to feel emotion. That's emotional devaluation. He stops empathizing. He stops caring. He stops attaching. Not because he's cold, because his brain is numb. And numbness kills relationship potential. How can a man connect when his nervous system is wired for isolation and shock? He can't. He becomes a psychological spectator. Watching life instead of feeling it, this is the paradox. He can be in a room full of friends, at a party, at a family dinner, at work, and still feel disconnected. Because the isolation isn't physical. It's neurological. His brain built a world where reward is private, where comfort is solitary, where intimacy is replaced by impulse, where vulnerability is substituted with stimulation. He didn't lose friends. He lost the capacity to feel connected. He didn't lose love. He lost the capacity to feel deserving. He didn't lose excitement. He lost dopamine diversity. He wasn't escaping loneliness. He was manufacturing it. That is psychological exile. That is the hidden bill the brain pays. The cost is not blindness, impotence, physical weakness. Those are jokes people throw around to avoid the real truth. The real damage is emotional fragmentation. The cost is shame he can't verbalize, anxiety he can't explain, numbness he can't fix, loneliness he can't escape, identity he can't recognize. He didn't lose sexual energy. He lost the psychological infrastructure of a present human being. Addiction didn't take his body. It colonized his mind. He was surrounded by people, yet mentally isolated. The mind hates discipline because discipline kills dependency. That is the first truth no one wants to admit. Discipline is not motivational quotes, not journaling, not believing in yourself. Discipline is forced neurological starvation. He removes access to stimulation. His brain panics. His impulses scream. His nervous system begs. That isn't weakness. That is withdrawal. Withdrawal is the brain saying, "You took away my sedative, now I must feel everything raw." And most men run back to the habit because they think withdrawal means I'm failing. It actually means the brain is rebooting. When he commits to discipline, genuinely, not fake half-attempts, he triggers a confrontation with his nervous system. And the nervous system fights dirty. It weaponizes thoughts. Just tonight. You deserve it. It's not a big deal. You're stressed. Nobody knows. It pretends to care about him. But addiction never cared. Addiction only negotiates to survive. So discipline is war. War between his future self and his chemical impulses. This is where most men break, not because they are weak, but because they expected discipline to feel good. It won't. It will feel like hell. Because discomfort is detox. Digital lust wasn't pleasure. It was anesthesia. Discipline removes anesthesia. And the pain underneath is emotional truth. People love cutting down slowly. They love easing off. They love tapering. That's compliance language. Addiction loves negotiation. Cold turkey is clarity. Cold turkey is declaration. Cold turkey means no bargaining, no moderation, no self-lies. He isn't reducing chemical reward. He's ending a psychological contract. That contract said, I need stimulation to survive. Cold turkey rewrites it. I can survive without reward. That is psychological rebellion. Addiction isn't a demon. Addiction is a routine. The brain associates. Places, times, positions, boredom, loneliness, nighttime, screens, scrolling. With stimulation, those associations fire automatically. Remove context, reduce compulsion. He removes devices from the bedroom. He stops scrolling at night. He stops using screens when emotional. He creates friction. Addiction hates friction. Because friction requires effort. Effort interrupts autopilot. This is where the brain starts panicking. Why can't I do what I always do? Because he is interrupting the script. Breaking the script is recovery. Nighttime is the emotional danger zone. Why? Because at night, inhibition is low. Loneliness is high. Anxiety is louder. Boredom is amplified. Reality is quiet. He seeks sedation. Digital lust becomes the sedative. So discipline demands a rule. No screens after a certain hour. He trades stimulation for sleep. He trades avoidance for recovery. The nervous system recalibrates when it stops chasing dopamine in the dark. That is biological reset. Men think blockers are weak. But barriers are tactical. His brain is conditioned like muscle memory. It moves without permission. Block the gateway, break the reflex. He uses blockers. He removes access points. He changes passwords. He increases friction. He's not proving strength. He's eliminating sabotage. Discipline isn't heroism. Discipline is architecture. The brain isn't healed by comfort. It's healed by discomfort. He needs activities that elevate stress tolerance, build discipline, earn reward, generate self-respect. Gym, cold showers, reading, meditation, journaling, skill building. These aren't life hacks. They are dopamine diversification. When dopamine comes from effort, the nervous system stops needing shortcuts. He stops surviving. He starts expanding. Recovery is not no more lust. Recovery is. Confidence returns. Attention stabilizes. Emotions normalize. Relationships reopen. Purpose resurfaces. He relearns presence. He relearns patience. He relearns intimacy. He relearns discomfort. He rebuilds his identity not with fantasy, but with evidence. Evidence that he can push through a craving. Evidence that he can tolerate boredom. Evidence that he can exist without sedation. That evidence becomes pride. Pride becomes identity. Confidence returns, not from ego, but from self-trust, when emotional numbing reverses. The nervous system finally responds to real people. Real smiles, real touch, real presence, real curiosity. Intimacy stops being awkward, because intimacy stops competing with fantasy. He stops comparing reality to overstimulation. His brain recalibrates to normal speed. Desensitization loosens. Connection becomes possible the more he trains waiting. The more reward feels earned. And earned reward hits different. It builds identity. It builds ambition. It builds capacity. It builds emotional gravity. He no longer craves shortcuts. He craves mastery. That rewiring turns him into a builder again. He returns to friendships, to social risks, to emotional expression, to honesty. Connection replaces secrecy. Presence replaces shame. Community replaces isolation. He stops hiding from life. He begins participating. That participation repairs the nervous system. Purpose is the highest dopamine. Not stimulation, mission. When a man has purpose, lust loses power, shame loses gravity, anxiety loses bite. Life gains momentum. Purpose gives him a reason to protect his identity. Purpose is the psychological shield. He thought discipline was punishment. It was liberation. He thought craving was weakness. It was withdrawal. He thought the habit defined him. It never did, it only distracted him. He stopped running from his mind. He started training it. He didn't lose pleasure. He regained presence. He didn't become perfect. He became aware. And awareness is control. No fantasy gave him confidence. No screen gave him peace. No stimulation gave him identity. He built those himself, one uncomfortable moment at a time. That's the ending. Not loud, not dramatic, just a man, finally able to sit with his own mind. Without fear. Recovery wasn't a miracle. Recovery was a decision. And the final cold truth stands. He stopped chasing dopamine and started chasing reality. That is the rebuild. That is the escape. That is the mind finally free.